Today we want to further our series on what to look for when you're buying a Cougar with Dave Wyrwas. Dave is from New Hampshire and he owns two, count them, two of the most original Boss 302s known of to this point. And he is of what capacity with the Cougar Club of America?
I am the Eliminator registrar.
And what does a registrar do, and why does it matter to somebody that's buying a Cougar Eliminator?
The registrar, we try to keep records of every known Eliminator, whether it's scrapped, salvaged, or still exists. And we then can provide that information to people interested in purchasing one, if somebody's going to sell it, provide prior owner information, history on the car, and also to allow us to know what cars still exist and potentially avoid rebodies, clones, etc.
And I've seen time and time again people show up at ClassicCougarCommunity.com and say, I'm interested in this car at Mecum, in Hemmings, on eBay. What can people tell me about it? And guys like him will chime in and say, okay, they've given you all the glossy stuff, the sales speech, but you need to know that in 1991, this owner did this, and that isn't being disclosed. So very valuable information. And I don't want to slam the sellers. A lot of these sellers have no idea because they didn't do their due diligence when they bought it. And sometimes when you come with all this documented information to the seller, the price changes. Sometimes it can go up too, so it can go both ways.
Yeah. It protects the seller and the buyer.
This is going to be a somewhat long video because we really want to get into the detail of this car, and a lot of what we're going to do here pertains to the Boss 302 Mustang. So we're just going to take you from one end to the other of this car and a little of the other too, and show you what you should be looking for when you're considering a 1970 Boss 302 Cougar and Mustang to some extent. So let's start where? Would you like to start at the hood?
Might as well start at the hood.
Okay.
Well, we'll start first off that this car is, other than the driver's door's original paint, it's a one-owner car. It has a little over 30,000 miles on it. So it's never been restored. It had been sitting in the garage since 1981. I purchased it in 2015. So now I'm its caretaker. I don't consider myself an owner. I'm the caretaker. So the gentleman purchased the car in September of 1970. The car was built in October of 69. So it had sat on the lot for quite a while. It was a stock car. A couple of the options that it has, you may notice that it has the front bumper guards. It also has, part of that protection package includes the door edge guards and the front and rear floor mats. I think that's all that's in the package. Am I correct?
I am not thinking of anything else. Different years, different things were involved. If
Exactly.
it was a 72, you might have had the bump strip down the side.
Exactly. So in the front here, of course, we have an Eliminator. So we have the blacked out grille, which was unique to the Eliminator. The standards were kind of a one chrome pattern, and then the XR7s had a slightly different chrome pattern.
And notice that this is a black, or is this a gray? Let's look at the color of this paint here. Okay, this looks like charcoal metallic gray instead of black. Some of them are black. Have you seen both on Eliminators?
I've seen both. And this is an early car. I don't know if it's as you get later into production. This car did spend most of its life in a garage. The gentleman that bought it, he had already bought the house before he bought the car. So the car spent its whole life in the same bay in the garage. Yes, it came out of Waco, Texas, but it was inside all the time, so we don't see a lot of fade or deterioration of surfaces or in the interior, et cetera, et cetera.
Now you've refrained from detailing this car. Why? I mean, why not get your steel wool out and your scrub brush and your chemicals and just go over this? Why aren't you doing that?
Partially because, as I said, I'm the car's caretaker at this point in time.
So you would like it to look shinier and nicer, but you fear that you might erase some patina. And for you guys, like myself in my younger years, I'd see this little, what's this little thing? I'm going to scrub that off. Well, let's not do that. That was an inspection sticker along the line, and it's no longer legible, but we see the location there as original. There here we have another outline of an inspection sticker. Show us some other things under this hood that if you were to scrub brush it and steel wool it and chemical it and power wash it, what would disappear? What are you trying to keep here?
Well, you would change the luster and the finish on this, on the shock tower caps, all these various parts on the hood hinges, the springs, that you can tell kind of what the finish was, but it's not. We're not going to clean them all up. We're not going to scrub them. We're not going to brush them. We're not going to paint anything. We're going to leave things as they are and just carefully clean.
So you put your hands on dozens of 70 Boss 302 Mustangs and Cougars. What stands out here on this car like, whoa, you never see this? Show us some items.
Some of the things on this car are like the way that the clamps are here, that we have a tower clamp on one side, but we have a band clamp on the other. That we have this one, there are two variations to the vacuum hose fittings. This one has the two plastic pieces. That there's one here, then there's another one down underneath. After we remove the air cleaner, we'll see that. The variation that Ford went to later in production, they went to one vacuum fitting. So instead of having, they went to a 5-port and combined the two, which then eliminated this one short hose. So easier assembly line as they went into production. Again, as I said, this is an early car. It is missing its little L bracket on the back.
Goes right here.
Doesn't look like it was ever installed, doesn't look like those bolts have ever been out, but there should be a little L bracket back there.
Okay.
That was one of the things that jumped at me as missing. Also the rev limiter. The rev limiter on this car is dated. As I said, the car was built in '69, but it was sold in 1970. The rev limiter is dated a couple of weeks after the car was built. So what I think transpired is that there was some kind of issue with the car that caused the problem. So that area of the car, we know the wiring isn't correct there. It's been messed with, been modified.
So are you tempted to go out and find an original date-coded rev limiter for this and just place it in the trunk?
Potentially. But as you know, certain things are very difficult to find. That is one thing, the rev limiter correct stamping. The other thing that kind of jumped at me, two other things. One is that this is still an original decal with the plastic trim on the top.
Yeah, the plastic gives it away, and usually this plastic clear coat has been peeled off, pressure washed off, but what gives it away for me is see the clarity in these letters, how sharp and crisp it are. The Osborne reproductions, if you look close, they look like a photocopy, a little bit blurry, less crisp. That's cool to see that. And same with this lettering. Look how crisp that lettering is as opposed to a sticker. There's certain things that you're never going to get on a restored car. Tell us about the challenges with getting a battery in this. Well, look at that tiny battery tray. Group 20?
22.
Okay.
From the factory, though, they would have had a 21.
Group 21.
It would have been a group 21 would have been what was in it from the factory.
And that battery tray is?
Smaller.
Yeah.
The 22 is the battery that fits in the tray, which was the service replacement per the owner's manual.
Okay.
Per all the books, it was always the 22 was the service replacement. 24 was the heavy-duty option on a Boss car. Of course, 27 was the heavy-duty option on
Cobra Jet, big block.
standard, actually.
Actually, you could get with a performance package on a '69 Cougar. Why getting a Power Dome hood stripe got you a bigger battery, we don't know. Let's group these together.
Exactly. There was a rhyme and reason to why Ford did everything, but what they are, we don't necessarily know. But that's a 22. That's a sometime in 1970 date coded, so it would be proper for this car. You can't buy a 22 now. You have to get a 22 NF to fit in the tray. That's what I used to start.
NF, not Ford?
Narrow.
Okay, there you go.
The battery is substantially narrower.
Tractor battery, basically.
It's a tractor battery, exactly. And so, yeah, interstate battery, no problem getting one and starting the car. She starts, runs, et cetera, et cetera. The other things that it's amazing that survived were both of the
Plastic bat wings.
is what I call them.
I call them grill fillers, hood fillers.
And they were to complete the space in your front grille.
Yeah. And the driver's side one is the one that's always broke because that's where you reach in to grab the hood release. So believe it or not, this little piece of plastic in the right hands is worth $250. And that's today's money. Who knows what it'll be 10 years from now to have a
Correct.
correct, part numbered piece. The passenger side one's a little easier to come by.
Right, and then the hood blanket survives to some extent. Now, all Cougars should have a hood blanket unless it's a Ram Air car.
Right.
So all Eliminators should have a hood blanket except a Ram Air car.
And that was just to suppress noise because this was supposed to be a little more refined car. It doesn't really fit a Trans Am Boss theme. Whatever. Maybe that's why they didn't sell a ton of these. Your 70 Mustang just looked Trans Am. You had a functional hood scoop shaker option. You had 15.7 wheels, a little lighter car. None of this frou-frou and extra
Sound insulation
there.
in the tunnels.
So this car is an anomaly. Why did they ever build this? Who would they market this car to?
This was marketed to somebody who didn't want a Mustang. They wanted something a little more luxurious. They wanted something that would still go fast, go around a corner, but yet not have that look that the Mustangs would have. Just something a little
Explain
different.
this bramble of wiring here. Boy, this looks busy. That looks like the first thing a performance enthusiast would just throw away. What's going on here?
Well, again, that's the rev limiter. And so these connections here, this one from the coil, from the distributor, just would replace this one on the coil. Then this would just disconnect. This would disconnect and go to the other side. And that's it. Then the rev limiter at that point, all the wires are removed except for this one ground nut, which is why you have a stud on the front of a Boss 302 intake manifold, is for the ground for the rev limiter.
Now, isn't there normally a piece of cloth type black, we'll call it hockey stick tape, bicycle tape that goes around these two things here?
Right. These should all be taped up. And that's why I say.
So this was replaced, and so they untaped it. And of course, the service tech isn't going to go find correct tape or anything. You just rip the old tape off and plug that in, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's why we don't see the tape on that.
So that's why this area of the car has been messed with.
These appear to be original spark plug wires. I see, is that the 40th week of 1969 that this may have been produced?
Fourth quarter.
Fourth quarter. Oh, it's not a 40, it's a 4Q.
It's a Q.
Okay.
Now that wire is original. When I bought the car, he had an Excel chromed coil in it. He had taken the yellow top and put it in the Excel box and put it up on the shelf. So that's the original coil to the car. And that's why I say this area of the wiring harness, we know it's not as factory. However, we can see here, we can see the overspray on the intake manifold from when they painted the car.
Oh, that's cool.
Painted the engine.
You know, what restoration is going to do that? A guy restoring it's going to make sure this is beautiful bead blasted aluminum and this is blue, but that's the way they did things.
Yeah, they would put a mask down onto the intake manifold when they painted the block. So the engine was assembled at that point as far as the intake, etc. And they would just...
Where else do you see overspray on these low mile cars that a restorer wouldn't duplicate normally?
That's one of the primary spots. You won't usually see it too many other places, but on the blocks, that's where you'll see it.
I notice there's no ribs in this hose. It's smooth all the way. We see the ribs here in this hose. The correct alligator texture on this.
On both the upper and the lower hoses, also on this.
Mm-hmm.
We got because these are original on these these hoses. I don't think this smog has ever been off.
Mm-hmm.
To the best of my knowledge, I know the valve covers have been off because, of course, 30,000 miles on a Boss 302 engine, you're going to have to adjust the mechanical lifters.
Explain these zip ties here. This isn't unique to the Boss. This is just a 1970 Cougar thing, and these are located elsewhere in the car, and they're rarely on a parts car. Are you ever going to see this or the tape? Explain some of these little things that most people overlook on their restoration.
These were put on, I think, at the factory to keep pairs of tubes together as the car is going down the assembly line.
So once it was in place, you don't even need these.
No.
So most people, if they've broken, they throw them away, they're gone.
But they were used in most cases. You've got those two. There's another one down here at the joint where the tubes would go through, and the assembly line worker would have to put them together. So you want the tubes together,
right,
as you're going down the line.
Okay, you showed me this little tie here, and this wasn't found from this particular car, but it came off a 1970 Cougar. Tell us what that silly part is.
This silly part is to hold the two brake parking brake cables together on the assembled rear axle subassembly.
Otherwise, they would have been lifting it in, probably not by man, but by some lift, and those cables would have been flopping around. They would have been stepping on them.
And they wouldn't have been together.
So I envision right there where the guy that put these in all day, two guys, who knows, there'd be piles of those on the floor. They'd take and just go like that. And this one accidentally stayed with the cables.
This one stayed as they put the little metal piece together and actually attached it on the undercarriage.
Wow, it's just neat to see that little history that, for the most part, it's gone forever. The last few guys alive that were putting these cars together are dwindling. So it's great that guys like you are preserving this history for Type A people that have nothing better to do with their life than obsess over zip ties.
Well, and these are like the blower motor protector on a big block car.
Yes, should have been taken off, but I'm in a hurry.
Yeah, or you just don't feel like doing it at this time. So that's what this one is.
Okay, here's some more observations I'm seeing right away. I'm seeing this little unique 90-degree here with the gussets here. I'm seeing blue paint poking through a shock tower here. Why don't we take off the air cleaner lid and show us some more detail that educate us, take us to school.
Now, on the air cleaner here, we do have a clamp here. That's what holds this tube on.
And what's the interior color of this tube?
It's kind of a brownish tannish. Then, of course, this is the 70 snorkel for a Boss 302. We've got the black grommet, but with blue for the nipple. Then also, if the car was equipped with California emissions, there would be a T nipple coming out here to feed down to the charcoal carbon canister. But since this one does not have California emissions, it's got a little star. And then we've got a vacuum door on the other side.
Now, do you see any variations of where this engine ID tag is placed, or do you normally see it there on untouched cars?
On untouched cars, it should be on the coil mount bolt.
Okay.
My understanding is that should be the other way around. Of course, we know that bolt has been out because there was an Excel coil in there.
Okay, so it got switched around.
So that's another case. I believe that should be folded down.
Okay. And tell us about carburetor date code, and when do we generally see a production date? How close to production date do we usually see these carbs being made?
These would be made in advance in batches. This one has a 992, so that would be the second week of September 1969. And that's a 9J8, and J is?
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Do we skip I?
We skip I.
And J. So you got your 9th month.
9th month, which is September. Again, this car was built in October 13th, was its official assembly date. So that would be a 3 to 4 week lead time.
There you go.
Now, you'll also find, as I said, they were built in batches. So you might find a 6 week, you might find a couple of months sometimes, depending upon how common or rare the carburetor is.
Okay. Cable routing. Notice it goes under here, not over.
Yep. Now here's also, as I was saying about the vacuum line, see we have a single line here to feed over to the air cleaner, single T, and then we have the 4-line T further up to feed the air canister, to feed the distributor, and to feed the thermal switch for the overheat. They replaced that later on. They went to a single 5 instead of the 3 and the 4. Save a couple of pennies. Also on the Boss 302s, we have a steel heater hose, a double tube that the heater hose is between the firewall at the heater box and then for the front part of the engine. These were just...
And how do those differ from the Cleveland?
They're shorter, and they're offset. If I remember right, the Clevelands, they're the same. They're kind of in line. It's been a while since I've messed with the Cleveland ones, but these ones have more of an offset to them as opposed to two being close together.
Right. Okay, I see the original black shocks.
Yes.
What was the original finish on this?
Phosphate and oil.
Phosphate and oil. And the hinges?
Phosphate and oil.
Okay.
That's why we've got some deterioration to the finish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I see the X on the fuel pump here.
Yeah, that's a Carter X fuel pump.
Mm-hmm.
That has been rebuilt.
Okay, and then I see this unique 1970 Boss 302 oil line for relocating this sending unit. I guess it got a little crowded down there, so you put it up here.
Especially if you had power steering.
Especially.
And of course, all the Cougars all have the big bulb because we have a gauge.
Yeah, not an idiot light.
So we have the combination of the tack and the gauge, as opposed to a Mustang, which has either or.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of weird in the Ford parts book is that they refer to whether you have a oil pressure sender
Mm-hmm.
as to whether you have a tack or not.
Explain the function of this solenoid.
That's the, so that when the car shuts off, you don't have a diesel run-on situation. It's to allow the butterflies on the
Primaries.
to slam shut.
Good. Okay. Well, let's put it on the rack. Since we started with mechanical, let's continue on mechanical. Nothing about the fan, belt.
No, those have.
Notice the texture on the shroud.
Yep.
We call this horsehair. Probably says Barnum on it somewhere in here.
We can't get to the date code on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has kind of a brown finish.
Yep. A little bit of, like you said, the horsehair with the roughness to the texture.
Mm-hmm. Just start pointing stuff out to us. Hey, look at this. You got these tabs here, which would be on an early car. The latest cars maybe didn't have this style. That was for the alignment system that was being phased out about that period, right?
Yeah, they call them jacking tabs, but there should be two on each side. These are the original upper and lower control arms. We've got a slight tweak here in this one strut rod.
Which probably happened when the chin spoiler got broke off.
Right, because in the mid-'70s he bought a chin spoiler replacement. We'll see the spoilers later.
Uh-huh.
We still have a yellow and a green daub on this front strut rod.
Uh-huh. And then we got our correct rubber in here with the tabs here to keep it all in place.
Let me get this date code right here on the smog pump.
And I've noticed on the really rare applications, you'll see just a few runs of them as opposed to, a 302 two-barrel part. They're making them every week.
That's why you may find them as much as 3 months, because they made a batch,
Stopped, made
stopped,
a batch. Yeah.
they made another batch. We also have codes here. I don't know if we'll be able to pick up. They're difficult to get. You can get to the 4910S on the fuel pump, and then there's one on the other side. That is the date. That's the part number. The 4910S is the part number.
Okay.
And we still have this asbestos shield on the motor mount. We've got that asbestos shield up there because I don't think those motor mounts have ever been out.
Okay, and that's unique to the Boss. I don't recall seeing that on a Cleveland car.
Is it on?
Look how the contour fits the Boss 302 exhaust manifold.
Yeah, is it on the Cobra Jets?
I don't recall seeing this original of a Cobra Jet in recent years, so another thing to put in the comments, guys.
Now this is a non-power steering car, so we don't have all that
Extra.
stuff in the way.
Right.
And I actually prefer the non-power steering cars because I find that they're a whole lot more positive in their steering.
Well, the beauty about a Boss 302 with a 4-speed, you can rear steer it.
Yes, you can.
You can tell guys like you and I were driving these cars when they weren't so valuable.
Yes, you can. Let's see. We still have the insulation on the starter cable up here. Now again, we notice some finishes here. Most of this, we can see some black, but most of it's kind of wore off over the time.
Talk to us about, if you can, upper control arms unique to 1970 with the cutback design and 3 rivets.
3 rivets, no bolts. Of course, the service replacement is you drill out the rivets and replace the bolt. Replace the ball joint with with 3 bolts to hold it in.
I'm going to give a shout out right now to Marcus Angel, and we'll put his website on the screen. If you want your original control arms and suspension parts rebuilt, he's the guy currently.
Bosses did not get press-in freeze plugs, they got screw-in. This is the original mounting on the speedometer cable. The routing for a 391 and a 430 car, it includes a adapter, which requires a screw-on cable.
And that's called, also known as a gear reduction or reducer.
Yep.
And that's because it was such low gears, you couldn't get the right speedometer gear on there, so you had to reduce it as it went in the tranny. That is a piece of gold right now. Actually, it's probably worth more than gold. Anyway, there is a go-around for guys that can't find the correct one. Isn't there certain four-wheel drives that had those? They're going to be a little different date code, but it's something to put in the place and make your speedometer work right and visually look okay.
Right. They won't look to the Type A's, they won't look quite right, but they'll suffice and they'll get your speedometer to work.
Right.
So then the cable comes out, it attaches here to the floor pan, and then goes up and over the top of the transmission. I haven't cleaned under here yet, obviously. We can tell that there was some kind of marking here.
Yeah, it's usually yellow, isn't it?
Yeah, we can see the yellow underneath. I don't know if we can get to it or not. Again, this is where it'll have to be cleaned very carefully, using paint thinner or something like that to oh no, we won't use paint thinner because that would take the markings off. We can see underneath here where they were not very diligent with paint, because that's where we have the surface rust.
Right. Yeah, nothing was really diligent here. I mean, we're seeing a quick swath of sound deadener that did almost nothing. I mean, you look at this region and what did it do? Nothing. So you got grabber blue here, and somewhere it transitions to, I don't see much slop gray on this.
No, this car does not have much slop gray.
Doesn't have any.
There is some, it's more of a dark, see if we look here, it's more of a dark blue.
Okay, explain slop gray, and there's another term for it too. It's called what? Some people call it something house mix. I forget.
Yeah, it was just they took the leftover paint at the end of the day. They dumped it into big drums, and it just kind of mixed together. So the color will vary day to day.
Yeah. So yeah, you got dark blue here. It's not slop gray, but it's slop. It's just get rid of the paint, and nobody sees underneath the car. Let's burn it up here. Another way to save pennies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now here we have the 70 Hz shifter. So we've got a lower shifter boot still in place. We've got the shifter rods. This is the reverse switch.
And notice how it's indexed.
Held in by a little clip. The harness comes down. We also have a lockout rod that the car has to be in reverse to get the key out. That's this rod here. So when the car's in reverse, that locks the steering wheel and allows you to remove the key. Those are oftentimes taken off. They're missing. People don't want to mess with them, so they just pull them off. Now the automatics had a similar
but different.
But it had to be in park.
Right. Let's transition over to this ugly paint. So if this was a restored car, we'd see a laser straight tape. Look at this. That's original too. I've seen this in multiple cars. This is not an anomaly or a repaint. Nope. This is what they did.
That's what they did. Now, I've seen the actual instruction sheet on how to do this, and it says to brush or spray. So in this case, on this car, we will find both. We will find places where it was obviously brushed because of the texture to it. Or the better example is actually over here, where you can tell when he pulled the brush away.
Yes. Ha ha! I love it.
So he was brushing here, maybe just to touch it up or whatever, and when he pulled the brush away, he caught the quarter.
Yeah. So many of these cars are so over restored. Now your show cars that did the circuit, you know, the very first ones, they really got detailed and whatnot, but on these production cars, it was how fast can we get them down the line? And they were done by humans and not robots.
Correct.
Let's look at this exhaust. There has been so many times where people have said, my exhaust should be right here.
No.
Look at this spacing here. Tell us about this spacing.
This spacing is the correct. These are the original. As near as I can tell, this exhaust is fully original to the car. We have the DOWA part numbers still on the mufflers.
Not Mustang, because this car would have been a little quieter and a different wheelbase and a little longer muffler than a Mustang, correct?
Exactly. The mufflers are a little longer and the tailpipes are a little longer.
To compensate for that wheelbase.
Yep. So, and we've got a date code here of, I believe it's 262. That's the 262nd day. They're both the same date code. It's 1969. Of course, this one is a C. This one is a D. The A and the B, I think, were Cleveland.
Right. I do believe so.
These are the same, though, as a 428 car.
They shared a lot of, between the exhaust systems, a lot of different things. Small block to big block, too.
Actually, the Clevelands may even be the same. The difference is only in the H-pipe.
Right.
Otherwise, the exhausts are pretty much interchangeable.
Okay. Let's look at the staggered shocks. Now, if I remember correctly, there's nothing special about these plates other than that you use 2 passenger side plates from any old Cougar.
Yep.
And switch one of them around.
Unlike on the Mustangs.
Which have their own part number that are and they're stamped R and L.
Then we also have an additional plate here for mounting the rear sway bar, which on a Cougar is different. The links are different than a Mustang. I believe these are different also.
They are, because you have this system here which requires a wider stance, so everything here is different. This shares some part numbers with like a 6.6 Fairlane, but nothing will fit Mustang. That's where almost all your Mustang big box stores have it wrong. They'll put, oh, this Cougar, Mustang, same, this, leaf springs. You don't know how many Cougar owners have bought leaf springs on the internet from Mustang guys and been sorely disappointed.
Because, of course, all the extra length in Cougar is from this point back.
Right. And here's a little piece of trivia. Instead of redesigning all new brake cables for these cars, they said, well, let's just put the extra couple inches that the wheelbase has and put it right here. Ta-da! So this is a Cougar part. Unique to a Cougar, not reproduced.
Now we also have this extra bracing up here, or mount point.
Different than Mustang, because your transition panel is stamped different on a Cougar than a Mustang. So you can't just buy a reproduction Mustang part and think you're going to go staggered shocks.
Right, and this panel is all the way across.
Right. And usually kind of sloppily put in, too. I mean, you look at some of these welds here and whatnot.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't...
A messy weld here.
Yeah.
We've got part numbers on the shocks still. Autolite, made in Canada.
Yeah.
DOW.
Yep. Yeah, so since you got a longer leaf spring, that meant you had a little more travel up and down of your differential, which required a shock that gave you the
extra
ability to travel longer. So every little bit of this is different. Very little Mustang here.
Now we have the remains of the paper tag here.
Okay, paper tag.
And that would have been the tag to designate that it was a 982, which is what the 391 rear axles were. We still have our axle tag in place. We've got the N on the case. I don't know if you can get to it with the Daytona pinion in the way. We got a stripe here, stripe here.
Yeah, your build sheet will call out these colors and whatnot. Dead nuts on is somebody, if you want to get a correct Cougar or Mustang driveline done, dead nuts on, check them out.
LB, TN, WT. So that would be light blue, tan, and white.
And that was so when your worker on the line was following the instruction sheet, the recipe, if you will, he could easily go to the shelf and grab the right one based on colors. Forget reading a long number and memorizing it. Just grab the colors. That's how they found it was easiest. And a lot of these guys in the day actually weren't even high school graduates and weren't completely literate.
And you don't want to try to put a Mustang in because it's a little shorter.
Right, right. So color codes everywhere you look on these cars. And they aren't nicely done. They're blotches here and there. And you can see the red ones on these wheels right here. You know.
We've got two there. And we've got two opposite.
And why would you do that?
so that whichever way you grab the wheel from, you're going to see the two.
Okay, just make it
I
foolproof
guess it's
on 'em.
probably their reasoning for it.
Yeah.
All four rims were the same, that they have the four red marks, which are also the same as the spare in the trunk, which we'll look at in a little bit.
Okay. Also, we have a different brake line here for Mustang. That's another thing. If you go to a Mustang catalog, they'll say they're the same. No, for some reason there was a different size fitting, and the reason they put a different size fitting on there so you couldn't accidentally put a Mustang on that wouldn't be the right length. Again, more travel. You need a little more rubber to adapt to that travel.
Because you don't want to put the stress on a brake hose.
Oh yeah.
And brake hose.
So let's make it foolproof where they can't even make it fit.
And of course the Cougar brake line, the steel line coming down the transmission tunnel, is longer than a Mustang.
Longer.
So you put a little different fitting on it. Makes it so that you got to put the right parts together or they don't go together. Because of the way the shocks were staggered or non-staggered, the exhaust is the same. So if you had non-staggered shocks, if you had an automatic 428 car or a Cleveland car, your shocks went out here instead of here. So you had to make sure that you had the clearance for the exhaust and
For
the carrier.
Yeah.
Because that's more for the carrier, that at full, you know, if you're bottoming out your suspension, you don't want to hit the exhaust. So that's what that little dent was for. Although it's not really a dent, it's a design dent. Then also in the exhaust, as Don pointed out earlier about the spacing, but they're not symmetrical side to side. This one comes straight out. This one comes out and then has a little kick in.
Yeah, so if they didn't do this, you're looking at the car, the exhaust would be offset here.
Right.
So let's get it, you know, where it should be and away from the leaf spring. And the reason they had to do this jog was to clear everything in this zone. So they had to get away from it and then come back in it to clear everything.
And then they want to bring them out so that they're about the same distance, so that your two pipes were about the same distance side to side.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of arguments on the internet. People want to see that exhaust right here. Why is it way back here? Well, I've seen time and time again, original cars, this is where they're supposed to be. I've never seen them on these cars that close.
Or they want to see them.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, that you see them that they're actually, they show down, or that they're not flat cut,
Right.
that they're angled cut.
Yeah.
We still got the drains in place. These are the way that the shaping, the original, unreplaced, inner quarters. A lot of times you'll see flat, somebody will restore a car or fix a car. And of course, this is another piece. It's different than a Mustang. So you can't get the right drop off for the inner quarter.
Well, that's changing. We just got our first Dynacorin reproduction of the 6768. So give it time.
It's in process.
Yeah.
It's in process.
Slow. Notice that these are headed towards the tank.
Yes.
Gosh, doesn't that look dangerous? What if you got in a side collision and just nailed that into there? I always thought that this should be the other way around. Is this how you usually see them, pointed towards the tank?
Yep.
Oh, you'd never see anything close to that these days. Or even in the mid-70s, they would have got smarter about stuff like this.
That's correct. And that's part of the exploding Pinto scenario.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this is a low fuel,
So it's got 3 prongs.
3 prongs, but only 2 wires.
Right. The third prong is just an alignment stud, so you can't get it on backwards. And again, at every turn, they tried to make it foolproof.
Right.
Now, I want to, we do sell these reproduction stainless steel, but don't throw away your original, because this has got a number on it. And as the years goes by, those core pieces get more and more important. So if you're a preservationist, even if you aren't, the next guy might be, save your original non-working rotted fuel sending unit because of that part number.
Now, of course, this is a B prefix, because the A prefix is the non-sender.
Right.
And you can read the numbers there. And it's a DO. We also have remnants of the pink piece of paper that was wrapped around it, again, so that they would know to grab the right sender. I don't know what was on a non-low fuel indicator sender. Unfortunately, I did have to replace these rubbers. Of course, you know.
I'll bet you kept the original.
No, because they came off and they
In
broke
chunks.
into three chunks just because they were all dried and hard. That rubber had to be replaced as the other
Now,
pieces.
I want to interject something in there. There's going to be original owners, or maybe you're a second owner, who knows, but you want to preserve the car, and you have the attitude like Dave is, I'm just the keeper of this car. Now, if you're looking to sell an Eliminator, yeah, money's important. They're worth big money. But if you want to place this adoption, if we'll call it that, in the right hands, a guy like Dave is a good person to get in contact with, because he knows not all, but most of the big players that want to preserve cars, put them in a collection, and show them. And that's important to me too. So again, if you want to contact this guy, you can do it through
the Cougar Club of America.
Perfect.
The Eliminator registry. You can find my links there.
And he's a participant over at ClassicCougarCommunity.com. The beauty of putting it there is everybody gets to play and learn from your conversation. And of course, if it gets private, you can go off into private messaging.
And also I'm on the Boss 302 site, I'm on the 428 site.
And what's your username on these sites?
70B302CAT.
There you go.
That's the name I use pretty much universally across all the sites. Obviously why. We can see the remnants of the black paint on the axle, but there's not a lot left. We've got a number that was written here.
Okay, there's 3 versions of trim rings that they used throughout the years. This is the one that's not brushed, and they have different depths. Okay, we have the C70A part number, so this would have been on a 67 Fairlane, probably a 67 Mustang, so this being a 6-inch wheel, not overly deep trim ring. Cap is unbrushed. They do have a version that has brush on it. Maybe that was used in 71 too on Comets. I'm not sure about that. Go ahead and let's pop the cap.
Now these, I didn't paint these. I just took them down, hosed them off, because they were sitting in his crawl space above his garage.
Oh, he had aftermarket wheels on it.
He had torque thrustees.
Ah.
When he put the torque thrustees on,
Good catch.
that one's doesn't have a label in it. Some of them do.
Okay, so we got a 9, which would mean 1969. M for, is it Motor Wheel Company?
Yeah.
And K would have been the month. Okay. Notice the 31 spline axle configuration here. You got the 2 drill outs here as opposed to the big cutout here. Normal looking lug nuts. The right guy bought this car.
Yep. This is still the original block. The block's never been out. There's a serial number on the back of the block, serial number on the top of the transmission.
Yeah. And why did, I would say more than half of these, wouldn't you say, have service replacement blocks? What was the issue?
Well, on the Boss 302s, they had problems with the piston skirts. And that was a design flaw, that they were weak, and so they would crack. And my other car, my 430 car, it has the original block in it, but it's 30 over, because when the second owner bought it, the pistons it was making a funny noise. My other Boss 302, it had a D1 service block in it.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, it had been warranty replaced. The heads and everything else were date coded correct to the car, but of course the short block had been warranted, where they just took the 2 blocks out, put them side by side, swapped all the parts over, put it back in.
Right.
So, notorious problems with Boss 302, so to find a Boss 302 with its original drivetrain is not as common as finding a 351 car with its original drivetrain.
And when you're shopping for a Boss 302, it's almost a given that it's going to have that done. So it's a knock on the value, but it's commonplace. So probably don't steer away from a car just because it's had a warranty replacement, rotating assembly, short block.
Correct, correct. Or is 30 thousandths over, or potentially has had a sleeve put in it.
Right.
If done properly, for the type of driving you're probably going to do with it, because you're not going to go out and carve canyons.
Test the rev limiter.
Oh, I have on occasion, not on this car, of course, but on other ones I have tested the rev limiter, or had to disconnect the rev limiter.
Okay, I think the owner opted to put a leather-wrapped steering wheel on this, which I don't think was available till 1973, right?
Which is what this is. He purchased the steering wheel in December of 1973. I think he paid $41.47 for it.
Right.
He saved the original. I have the original wheel uncracked. The center horn piece is exactly the same because it's a Ford steering wheel, so it bolts right in. It's very comfortable. But
and what we see here with this sticky, gooey stuff is that's the original oils and chemicals bleeding from the dash pad. There's no way to ever get them put back in, so all you can do is scrub and scrub and scrub to get it off, and that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Okay, you got your Hearst T-handle with set screw.
Yep.
A little different change in 71. Flat bar. You got your floating piece here. And look, this is, let's see, that is original carpet.
Yes.
And the reason I know is how woolly it feels.
Right.
And I'm amazed at the color retention here. They're usually more faded than this.
Again, like I said, it was always in the garage.
Right.
So even though it's a Texas car, which you would think would be sun-baked, because of the way he kept it.
Mustang part number on this. And again, it just floats. It fits right under this accordion joint here. And carpet's cut to suit. And it's just that simple. Nothing fancy here.
Nope. Just to give you a little finish between the two pieces.
Right. Okay.
And of course, as it's an Eliminator, we've got the camera case on both this panel with the clock, because the Eliminators all came with the rally clock, and the camera case on this panel.
Now, if it was a 1969, at some point they were vinyl plastic, and in the heat they always curl a little bit. So this being a 1970 is going to have a die-cast emblem, which is prone to pitting. This one is not pitted.
No, because again, this car was always, for some reason, the conditions and everything else were just extremely good for preserving.
Yeah, look at these mats. You never see these mats that aren't frayed on the sides.
No.
And yeah, that's a beautiful mat. Probably even has a part number there. Yeah, yeah. And there's the rear. Notice the ribs are going a different way. That's because it was basically a Mustang mat. So that's the way they're supposed to be. Block off plate because you didn't need toggles for the XR7, and you have your idiot lights built into here. So no need for toggles or idiot lights. So you do a block off, and what a lot of people don't know is you have a harness connection there for those idiot lights that requires a special bypass, we'll call it,
right,
looped like that, and we got those reproduction actually.
Because the XR7 and the Eliminator use the same dash harness.
Right.
So if that bypass isn't in place, your interior lights won't work.
Right.
Now he added the map light, so it has the map light, which was an option.
Right.
But on this car it did not come with it. He also added a trunk light. Again, all Ford parts, and he put it in with Fords. He kept the block-off plate. The block-off plate is in the box. That
Are those the original sail panels back there?
As far as I know, this interior is 100% original.
Yeah. So they're not embossed. There's no lights for them. They tuck under the rear window gasket. That package tray is unusually nice too. Usually that fiber covering is just turned to powder.
Yes.
And so that's
again, it gets into the storage conditions that this car was in. It was remarkably stored. That no critters got to it. He had cats and snakes.
Wow, perfect.
He had cats and
combo.
Snakes. So he had cats and snakes, no horses. But yes. Now, of course, the Eliminator, we've got the full gauge package, the same as the XR7. But of course, since this is a Boss 302, it has the 8,000 RPM tack instead of the normal 6. You will occasionally see a Boss 380.
Occasionally, you will also see a random 2-barrel late-built car with an $8,000 tack. Reason being, they had to use them up, and it seemed like on those performance parts, they always used them up on the least likely car, like the 70.5 Falcon taxi cabs got the $8,000 tax. No, not the $8,000 tax. The 120-mile-an-hour Speedos, the least likely car to ever go 120, a 6-cylinder 4-door. So okay, well, let's pop the trunk.
on the spoiler, you'll notice what we have here is we have one stud and one bolt. Now I believe that this was a change later on in the model year that they went to 2 studs.
Okay.
But early ones, and I'm not sure of a date yet, we had one bolt and one stud.
So folks with original cars, please chime in with your build date and what your configuration is.
Really what we're looking for is somebody with 2 studs.
Right.
Because we know the early is a bolt and a stud. So if you've got an October car, you should have a bolt and a stud.
Right.
We know it's
Just don't know that transition time.
and then we're going to have to work our way back to the transition.
Now, Dave, do you find that this hole drilled here was somewhat random?
That hole was actually done at the dealership, is my understanding, so that's what makes it random.
Okay.
Now, I've never seen that little rubber grommet in there before.
I haven't either.
I don't know if that's came with the kit, or if that's something that he added, or the dealership
That
added.
would have fallen off, if you weren't a careful owner, that would have fallen off the 3rd time you used it. So maybe that's just something all the other cars are missing and your car has. That's neat.
But that's why I said, I'm not sure. Now again, you notice we also have that, we've got a twist tie over there in the corner.
And that is common to any 70 Cougar. That would be on a 6.9 as well.
Right, and that's something that, it's actually called a tie lock, if I remember correctly.
Okay. You got your clip up ahead of it.
Well, and that's because he installed the trunk light. That was
Ah.
put on, that's a over-the-counter
Oh,
installation.
and notice he skipped the plastic protector
The little
here.
grommet.
Yeah.
But he put the wiring harness clips in.
Well, they came in the box.
Right. So I don't know why he left that out, but he did.
Well, probably because he didn't realize it until he got to the end.
Yeah, he had it all together, the wire was strong, and he went, oh, where does this go? He also added the rear speakers. Those are Ford rear speakers in the back.
And your package tray would already been perforated for them.
Yes. And the cutouts are already there for
The
them.
underlayment would already had the perforated cutouts as well. Okay, notice the spray pattern on the sound deadener. This will vary car to car who was doing it, and you know, were they right-handed or left-handed, and was it a Friday or a Monday? You know, look how little of that textured pattern you see on that quarter panel. Some cars will have pretty much the whole thing covered. So you people restoring cars, you know, just do it as random as you can.
Original trunk mat. We happen to have the part number right there.
And that would be a 69 part number with for a coupe, not a convertible.
Right, hence the C9, 69, W for Cougar, and the 65 designates coupe.
Now, have you found, dug in there and found any NOS fasteners? The way they built these cars a lot of times, they'd reach in, they did it so many times they could pretty much reach in and scoop about the right amount of fasteners, throw them down, and zip, 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 and if there was 1 or 2 left over, they usually left them, and there they are embedded with the underlayment. You just,
Haven't pulled it all out yet.
Yeah.
Again, it's something that, I don't know if that trunk mat's ever been out.
Yeah, and that's pretty brittle stuff, so do you really want to go there?
This one luckily still has a lot of flexibility to it, but yes, it will be brittle.
Now, I feel there's supposed to be a board there. Do we call that masonite board?
Yes, and that's to protect the...
Yeah, so you didn't wear a hole in your gas tank. There's a little bit of padding, if you will.
Correct.
So that's an item we ought to reproduce. That's pretty easy to reproduce, a chunk of masonite board.
Well, actually, they're not that hard to find, though, either.
Right. We usually have a few originals. Actually, we have them listed on our website.
Most originals, most cars will still have it in it because it's not something that...
Well, a lot of them have had the gas tank replaced, and people are like, what's this for?
Correct. But as long as the gas tank's never been out, and that's the same for a Mustang, you should have a jack protector.
Notice his decal on the bottom side of the trunk lid is in fact for a Mustang, and I bet if I looked at the corner of this, there might be a Mustang part number somewhere on this. Actually, I don't see it. A lot of times there's a little part number, but yeah, that's a Mustang right there, and I don't think that's a 70 Mustang either.
No, because it didn't change much. Now, if you went to a Space Saver or something like that, it's a different story.
Style steel wheel, there was a variation.
But since this is the base wheel,
yeah,
not a lot of change to it.
right. Okay, do we want to take this out or?
Yeah, well, here we have the jack handle. Why don't you talk about that while I pull this out?
Wow, look at that. It's never been used. The paint's not even chipped. Now, don't we usually see a sticker on this here somewhere, a decal?
No, the decal's on the jack.
It's always on the jack, that's right. Yeah, that's the decal I was thinking of right there. Oh, and being a staggered shock car, they would have had to randomly poke a hole in there with your utility blade and place the loop in a different spot, crimp it different, and of course there's your hole for non-staggered shock cars right there. So a little different placement for your spare. Some 1970 cars, I believe the later ones, will have a different configuration here. Marcus Angel has documented these in conjunction with our own Scott Banky, has documented these in depth. And it was a supplier thing or a plant thing and a date thing. So there's variations in the thread, there's variations in the configuration.
There's a coarse thread, there's a fine thread. We have a number in here, which I believe is a date code.
And to learn more about these jacks, one place to visit would be the Concours Mustang forum. Whether you're a Cougar owner or not, guys like Dave are on that forum.
So we got 9/1/29. And I don't think that had ever been out. I think it sat there for so many years.
Now look at the backer back there. It almost seems like that's backwards. Aren't we supposed to be looking at brown paper? It seems like I'm used to seeing that texture on the other side.
Which is, I think, where it should be. So did the assembly just put it in backwards? Because it's symmetrical, so it'll fit in either way.
Yeah, it'll go either way. So I'm going to say that's probably been there all along, unless he chose to access it that way when he put his speakers in, or the dealer did, and there it was lying there, and at that point it was still probably flexible. It isn't flexible anymore. And
you put it in backwards.
Put it in backwards. So just, who knows, but I'm used to seeing it turn the other way and this texture pointing into the cabin.
Now, this is the original spare.
Okay, and let's talk about what you see on this or don't see compared to any reproduction. We got a DOT, but no date code that I see.
Nope. There is a date code on here. I believe it's on the other side. You notice there's no size on this one. There's no F7014 in raised white letters, because this is a October built car. That would be the original valve stem and cap.
Now wait a minute, does this have Dearborn air in it?
Whatever air would be left in it would be probably original, because I don't think it's ever been actually...
No, it's never been mounted.
It's never been mounted.
Never hit the ground.
Well, the other way you can tell too is because we still have the...
Oh yeah, yeah.
From where the mold seams...
In the stripe.
Well, and also the mold seam here, we still have flexible rubber from where the seam mold separated. And also there's no tread wear indicator on the sidewalls. If you look on a set of a new set of reproduction, by federal law, they have to put TWT. I think it's TWT where the tread bars are on the sidewall, so that you can find them.
Wow.
Now we had a number here. There was a 9 drawn here.
Yeah, grease pen.
Yep.
And what would that have been?
Don't know. Now we've got one wheel weight on this side. If we flip it over, we've got a wheel weight. Here is the DOT marking. In there is a date code somehow or other. Marcus Angel again has a little note on his website as to how to read those. This indicator, Bob Perkins told me, was put there to determine where the wheel weight went. And if I remember correctly, Bob said the color determined what size weight went.
Oh.
I don't know what this little 065 sticker meant. Probably came out of Goodyear with that on it. Yeah, here we have the red and the 2 reds again.
Okay, here's something you will only find on the most original cars. These are random cuts out of some 1950s, 60s bias-ply solid wall tire. They were used as protectors. We saw the indentation on the tire where they were. Tell us about them, Dave.
When I first pulled the tire out for the first time, they stayed stuck to the tire, but they were in perfect alignment. One of them stuck to the tire, the other one fell off, and I noticed it when it fell. And they were in perfect alignment with the two rivets on the jack that lined up where they hit the tire. So they wouldn't be there for noise because it's not going to cause noise. So I would think that somebody wouldn't add them after the fact.
No.
So they were probably there to protect the tire from the rivets, that you wouldn't get a indentation of rivet potentially leading to a side blowout.
Right, so yeah, they're going the extra mile. It was up to you as the owner to keep it that way, which would never happen, but at least they could say, well, we did what we're supposed to.
And they were still there, and like I said, I don't think that tire had ever been out till the first time I took it out.
Right.
That's only the second time the tire's been out.
Okay, so we got our tape on stripe here, not painted on.
Yep.
And we got our black accent paint that, notice how it's, a little uneven right there.
Kind of like the side paint.
Yeah.
The pinch weld.
Yeah. And notice it's a little fuzzy when you get in this zone, and sloppy actually.
Now, of course, Boss 302s have blackout on them too, and they're different between Dearborn and Metuchen. So
Boss 302 Mustangs you're talking
yes.
about, yes.
All the Cougars were built in Dearborn in 1970.
Yes, they were. Now, 69 Eliminators, were they all built in Dearborn?
Yes, because
low production number, why do such a small run and spread it between two plants?
But also they had stopped California production at that point because Eliminators weren't built till April.
That's right. Okay, we got our black background and the foil. We got our kitty. This is the same kitty that you see on the center grille.
70 only.
This is not usually chrome under here. When you sand it down an original piece, you'll usually find that it's just was never chromed. I might be seeing a hint of chrome on this here and there, so that's a potential replacement on this bezel, and that's maybe what you would have done is just sprayed a chrome on to
right, but
match.
And we're not seeing any on this in the same chip places.
Mm-hmm.
And the fronts are the same. The front grills, if you take an original Eliminator front grill and you sand it down or whatever, you will not find chrome underneath the black.
Yeah. So this is a potential replacement. Here we got our cardboard fillers here. And notice they are screwed right here with these self-tapping pan head black phosphate screws. Somebody got in a hurry and decided not to unscrew them and rip it off. These are correct, believe it or not. These little spin-on fasteners are correct. The goo oozing out of here is correct. Everything very original here. The tape on here, look, that's in place. The ground strap. Again, look at the finish of the bolts here. And this was held on originally. Did it have one of these spinners to hold this on?
Yes.
Okay, so we're missing one of our green spinners here, and I do believe these are on our website as originals. So, and of course, this is not unique to the Eliminator. Any Cougar would have this. Just pointing this out for guys that are trying to make their trunk more correct. Okay, I want to cover the stripe kit, the placement, and whatnot. Now, all the previous reproductions up until just recently, and I'm going to give credit to John Benoit at Cascade Classics for us. All the reproductions, the A came to a point. Notice how this is flattened off. So the only correct Eliminator stripe kit for 1970 at this point is the West Coast Classic Cougar kit. Andrew worked hard on getting that correct. Now, Dave, tell us about the placement. A lot of times people want to put these in the middle. That just seems normal.
That's where people, a lot of times, if they haven't paid attention, original paint cars, they're always on the trailing edge here. They're not centered, but people think it looks better centered, but that's not the way they were put on at the factory. They're very close to the trailing edge for placement.
Okay, and moving along, this car is a little straighter than some, so the particular installer on this one knew what he was doing. Sometimes I really see some imperfections here, so notice the spacing here, it's about a ½ inch.
And you will see changes side to side because it was two people.
That's right.
You had one person did one side of the car and a different person would do the other side of the car. Yes, the spacing is not as deep.
Yeah, and also notice where it is in relation to
the
at 12
curve.
o'clock on the wheel well.
Yep.
And as we walk over to this side and look at 12 o'clock on the wheel well, it's almost double.
This
It's
one's a
almost
little
double.
higher.
Yeah, look at this. Let's follow this line straight up here. And that's an inch. It looks closer to a ½ inch on the other side. So isn't that interesting?
These were not assembled by machines and robots.
That's right.
We got the buck tag up in the corner here. We can see paint overspray behind it. Behind the buck tag should not be black because that was put on first. This was one of the very first parts, actually probably was the first part screwed onto the car.
Wow, you're right, because that was the directions on where you're going to punch holes and why.
And how you're going to put the buck together, which is the welded chassis, the
Right.
welded assembly. So we've got the serial number, we've got the body type. They obviously have to know, do I put a convertible setup on it, convertible roof type setup? We've got the paint color, we've got a rotation number 503, we've got the interior code 1A, we've got power brakes, and we've got the BT RAC for the both remote mirrors. And then we've got an inspector stamp, which was put on after. He would have added that stamp to the tag.
Okay, now I got a question. Now, this is a performance car, and so normally you'd get a 24-inch wide radiator, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a 20-inch radiator in here?
Not a Boss 302 came with the heavy-duty radiator option automatically.
Okay.
So a Boss 302 is always going to have the 24s.
Somebody out of habit, not paying attention, put the U-clips in here for the 20-inch radiator.
Correct.
Oh well, not a big mistake. Leave them there and go on. So that's a nice, a restored car. You would never see that left there, but on your car, that's part of the history. That's what happened. This car tells a story.
And it's not called out on the buck tag.
Right.
So I don't know when those clips would have been put in. Obviously, before the radiator went in, they would be put in.
So nothing on that buck tag says it's Eliminator.
No.
Except for the body type. Let's see.
Even the body type is a 65A,
Yeah,
which is all hardtop.
So how would the guy know? So maybe a lot of these cars got these U-clips. How would they know? Maybe they'd see the color and go, that's one of those Eliminators.
No, because this color was available for any car. Remember the
It wasn't special order, blue?
the competition colors were not exclusive to Eliminators in 70.
Were they special order though?
No.
Okay. Okay, mirror placement. Notice how I can't even get my pinky in here. Notice how ill-fitting this gasket is, and the whole thing is just ill-fitting. Why? Because this mirror was not designed for this car. It was, I believe, an afterthought. They said, look, if we kind of put it in this curved area and hold it just right, it kind of, not completely, matches the placement of the driver's side. So don't get upset when your reproduction, you can't quite figure it out because that's how they were from the factories. So let's look at this gasket here. It just doesn't match up right. It wasn't designed for this car. The driver's side has an embossment. This doesn't. But this should put some arguments to rest on what happened here. And of course, if you had an XR7, you had the stainless trim here, and it would crowd the whole assembly.
Didn't they cut it short?
No, they didn't.
Oh, okay.
Because it doesn't go up here.
Right, okay. You also notice this. These are very easy to crack, and this one has a little crack in it because at some point that screw got over-tightened.
Or just the slamming of the door, or somebody grabbing onto it. There's a lot of reasons. The reproductions are actually a little stronger in this area and are really good reproduction, actually.
And notice the screws are not painted.
Correct. Now, had this been a special order Eliminator, you would have saw no, special order paint I should say, you would have saw no mirror on this side, and you would have saw a chrome remote or non-remote mirror on the other side. Reason being is these weren't painted on the line. These were ordered already in color, wrapped softly, and then put on the car.
because they were fully assembled with the mirrors installed. And
Right.
on the remote side, they had all the remote cables before they came to the assembly plant.
So you'll also notice the orange peel and the texture and the paint on these mirrors, this one hasn't been buffed, is not going to match this, because this was done at the factory, this was done by the supplier.
Correct. The antennas were not installed at the factory.
Right, they were in the trunk with the hubcaps, with the chin spoiler. What else went in the...
And the trim rings, of course. The trim rings, the hubcaps, the spoiler, the antenna would be in the trunk. If you had a spoiler delete car, and there were a few spoiler delete cars, they would come also, the spoiler came with the car.
even though you deleted it.
Yes, because
You paid for it.
down the Eliminator line, well, down the paint line, the spoiler would have gotten painted anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they would put that in the trunk as well.
And a lot of people didn't want all the attention drawn to them, so they left that chin spoiler off and the rear deck spoiler off. And I've seen people hand them to the original owner. Here, I kept this for you.
Well, in some cases too, I think that potentially the spoiler disappeared
Because it didn't come with it.
because it's in the trunk and it's easy enough to take away,
Right.
and
Good point.
that
Good point.
that lunch pail parts
Yeah.
or car carrier, not
Well,
to, not to be,
and maybe the guy at the dealership asked his boss, "Hey, the customer doesn't want this. Can I have this?"
yeah, and then he put it on his own because he happened
There
to
you
have a
go.
Cougar, so he put it on
or
his
his
own.
Maverick.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, Dave, people are going to call you a nutcase. Why would you buy two cars just the same, one white interior, one green?
Black.
That's right. Duh. We were talking about green tinted glass. Anyway, the big difference here, 430 gear, the transmission code's different. Explain, if you're a salesman, why those two cars were sitting next to each other in the day. What would you tell the prospective buyer?
Well, if you actually look in the 70 dealer training book, or I forget what it is exactly called, they reference in there that a good drag racing car, if you want an Eliminator, is a 430 with the wide ratio transmission and the 430 locker. Now they're probably talking about an eighth mile instead of a quarter, but or you have to disconnect your rev limiter because.
But not a very friendly daily driver. So most of these 430 cars, the gears got chucked and they put 350s, 325s, you name it in there. So that rear end is very valuable.
Well, in that combination, actually, the wide ratio and the 430s, they only made 10
In the Cougar.
in the Cougar. The only other way that you could get the Windsor or the small block, or I don't like the term small block, but a Cleveland or anything else, a wide ratio transmission in 1970 was with the Boss 302. That you could get 430s was with a Boss 302,
Right.
and you could only get the wide ratio in the smaller displacement engines. So you couldn't get a 430, 428 car with a wide ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So
So if there's only 10 and only, you're the registrar, how many have survived in this combination?
the registry right now knows of 3, but they're not actually all. One of them is an original owner contacted me because he had his VIN number and he said, I owned this car back new, is it still around? And I said, well, I don't have a listing on it. So I'll add you to the registry, and if somebody reaches out and that car pops up or whatever, I will put you in touch with them.
So there's just 2 of these cars left. So if you ever need parts, you're going to have to scrap a Mustang.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
No, don't even say that. You're going to get hate mail. Okay, let's not go through this car from stem to stern, but let's point out the differences from the other car. Where would you like to start?
Well, the best place to start, of course, is with the 430s underneath. But because of the 430s, that mandated an oil cooler. So this is what is called a super drag pack. And Mercury actually called it that. They used that terminology on the window sticker and, of course, on the Imager invoice, which Kevin has. Kevin Marty has those invoices. You can get them from him. And if you don't have yours, I suggest you get it. For any 69 up Cougar. Unfortunately, the earlier guys, they can't get one. A lot of them would love to.
Right.
But so, yes, you've got this oil cooler that's mounted here to reduce the cooling temperature of the oil, because they were finding that with the 430 cars,
Over revving them.
that, well, not even over revving. At 66, 67 miles an hour, you're turning around 3,800, 3,900 RPMs. So, unlike today's modern cars with their tighter clearances and everything else, the oil temperatures were just getting too high.
Okay, and not only is it giving you a cooling effect, but you're increasing the oil capacity of the car by a half a quart?
No, full quart.
Full quart.
Full
Between
quart.
those lines and everything?
Between the lines and the cooler and everything else. Now, my understanding is that this oil cooler actually is a power steering cooler off a concrete truck.
Oh, we should be looking for those concrete trucks.
Ford would try to save money whenever possible.
Why not? This'll work.
So they found something
Especially
that
on low production stuff.
they found something that fit into their specifications.
That's a good piece of trivia. Somebody out there has a rusting old concrete truck in the back 40, and they don't know they got a $1,000 bill hanging off of it.
Now, also because of the oil cooler being mounted here, that mandated that the horns had to come over here together.
So, on the buck tag, would that alert the person to drill an extra hole for this horn?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that question definitively, because this car, when I got it, did not have a buck tag on it.
Okay.
So one of the prior owners, somewhere in its previous lifetime, had removed it. I bought the car in 2000.
Okay.
So that's a Kevin Marty reproduction buck tag on that.
Okay, and I see your little
That has the-
reinforcement piece
yep.
here.
Has the L bracket.
Notice the black paint and where it is and isn't.
And notice how the L bracket is mounted?
Yes.
To give
flange up and out.
Yes, because if you put it the other way, actually,
You wouldn't have as much rigidity.
exactly. That's giving you rigidity to the front, to
Right.
where the flex is.
Right. Okay, what else am I noticing about here? Now, is this a reproduction sticker? It looks like it is.
Yep. And also notice that it doesn't say Mercury on it, because there are Boss 302 4V Mercury stickers out there. I have yet to see one on an original car.
Okay, and this looks like a service replacement. It looks like correct Ford, but it looks service replacement.
That is correct.
Okay, and the caution fan sticker came later. Did they slip them in the? I didn't hit it hard. Did they slip them in the? Every 70 Cougar owner has to learn that. And you'd think I've owned, I don't know, maybe I've owned 370 Cougars. I
You've
lost
owned
track.
more than me.
And you'd think I'd have that down by now. Anyway.
You would think.
Okay, so did this decal come on the shroud in the service replacement box?
At some point they did, and I don't know when exactly that transpired. That shroud was on this car when I bought it.
Right. So we sell this sticker, but we don't say it's original. And I've never seen Mustang or Cougar factory original. I have film strips that show how to service these cars, and I've never seen an original 1969 or 70 photo with a caution fan sticker. Other people will disagree with me, and I'm okay with that.
The only exception that the caution fan sticker is on is the Boss 429 Mustangs, because they only have a finger guard.
Oh, and
So
of
on
course
that
they would.
on that little finger guard, it says caution fan.
Okay, there
So
you
that's
go.
maybe where the sticker came from that they then used later on.
Okay, I'm seeing the correct clamps here. Point out other things that are unique to this drag pack car.
The only other thing that is unique to a Boss 302 drag pack car, of course, the 428s, they strengthen the internal strengthening in the motors, and the 429s. The only other thing, of course, is you have the adapter on the oil filter for connecting up the hoses.
Okay.
So that's the only components to a drag pack are the oil cooler adapter, the oil filter adapter, the two lines, the upper and lower oil cooler mounts, the oil cooler itself, and the jumper wire for the horns.
And the jumper wire, if I remember correctly, that's got some Galaxy part number to it or something. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. It doesn't get driven a whole lot because it's about 70% original paint. It's still its original drivetrain. It's 30 over. Because it had the cracked piston skirt problems endemic to Boss 302s. It has a little over 70,000 miles on it.
Here we got the black trim.
This is a November 30th, December 1st car.
Okay.
So it's a later production than the other one.
Okay, and let's look at the variation here. Again, I hear arguments all the time where these mirrors go. Notice the other one, I couldn't even get my finger in between here. And look at this. So I think it was up to the judgment of the installer. I don't know if they laid down a template and got it just right. They laid down a template so the holes were spaced about the right place and got it done. So what I tell people is put the mirror where it makes most sense to you and have somebody stand in front of the car as you position it so aesthetically it looks right. Once you do that, then get in the car and make sure you like how it works.
Because unlike the driver's door, those holes weren't pre-punched.
Right, right. There is no embossment here to set a mirror.
The driver's door, the holes are already there.
Okay.
When the skin would be put on, the holes would be pre-punched in it. For, I believe, the remote holes even there.
Okay, well, shall we put this one up in the air and see if we see anything different than the other car?
We can do that. This one will be a little different underneath.
Okay, Dave, point out about these bolts in the oil cooler and what you'll see on some cars.
Now from here, this is the bottom oil cooler mount. You can see the two places where the bolts come through, the welded fittings for the bolts to come through. The bolts at the factory were installed from the back side. To do that, you got to pull the radiator. In some cases, people have added an oil cooler and they'll add it from the front, and the bolts will run the other way. They'll run through into, use like a lag bolt to just thread into the lower core support. Then the only other piece for the oil cooler, of course, we've got the adapter, which you can see here. We've got the braiding, the steel braiding on the lines to protect the lines because you obviously don't want something cutting an oil line. Externally, the wide ratio trans looks exactly as the close ratio. The only difference will be the markings on it, a rug AW versus a rug AV. The transmission is the same in a Cleveland 2-barrel, 4-barrel, or a Boss 302. In 70, they all use the same trans. So if you do find a transmission that has a serial number stamped on it, it's not necessarily a Boss 302 transmission. The wide ratio is at 278 first gear versus the close ratio of 232. By the time you get to fourth, they're both direct, 1 to 0. This car you've probably at least seen pictures of. It's the Automobile Quarterly car from when Randy Marble owned it. He owned it from 85 to 90. It's also so it's in the poster. At that point, when Randy had it, he put conies on it and he cut the front spring, so the car's a little lower. It still has the conies on it.
Okay, and here we see more sloppy paint here.
That's sloppy blackout.
Randomly done.
As far as I know, this car is 70% original paint.
This one, they were a little more careful than your other car. And look at that line. It's a little more careful.
So that blackout is as applied at the factory.
Here we got the 3 variations of blue, and this is a clip-on, I'm not going to pull it off, a snap-on center cap, so this is an original. We worked with Scott Drake, and he made one that was the tricolors, but they said, Don, we give up. The paint isn't holding up, it's taking too long, so now all you can get in the reproduction form is solid blue. So finding these original 3-color caps, NOS, very, very rare. But and a lot of people think that Eliminators came with style steel wheels. Well, in 69 that might have been the case, but in 70 they wanted to make the car more affordable to more people, so you could got standard interior in 70, not in 69, decor only, and you could have got the plain wheels or upgraded these style steel wheels. So just because you have an Eliminator doesn't mean you get 5-spoke rally wheels.
Well, and you also could get the rally wheel covers.
That is a very rare option, and they were a heavy thing. They had the fake lug nuts on them.
That sometimes people would try to put a wrench on and break them off.
Yeah, and that was an Eliminator option as well as any other car in 70 Cougar line too.
Yep.
You're right.
These are the reproduction tires. And if we look at them, they'll have the DOT, and they'll also have TWI right here.
TWI.
Tread wear indicator.
And then you follow that around, you will in fact see the tread wear indicator on the...
Now those are mandated. So those are one thing that will give a reproduction tire away if it's after a certain point in time, as well as the date code. Because they're now all mandated to have a date code on them.
Right. Okay, we got a ton of original documentation here. We're not going to be able to go through it all, but I thought this was cute. This guy kept everything, drove it home, and this was in the showroom, and look what, if it happened to be this one, that's what they had put on there. Think of the excitement of a lot of young people. They wanted to buy this car. They had the money, but so many people were turned away because they couldn't get financing and insurance because of their age or whatever. And so they would buy as close as they could and buy the spoiler and buy the mirror and all that. And years later, now that they have the money, that's what's driving these prices up. They wanted to get this car, but they were forced into the other. And so that to me just harkens back to the era and the enthusiasm you would have felt at the dealership. Point at this too, he even kept his a temporary trip permit for the trip home until he got his plates and everything. This is what we call the build sheet. It's going to call out things, crazy things like what color of stripes are supposed to be on the driveline and coil springs and all that. And that's not a document you can easily reproduce.
And notice that I set a rotation number of 503 on the buck tag. This is rotation number 639. And then we have a second build sheet that has a rotation number of 624 for the same car.
Okay, so why all the different rotation numbers?
The buck tag rotation number is based on the buck, when they're putting the buck together.
Okay.
When they're doing the welding part. This car, the other car, not this one, the other car had some kind of issue because it was bucked on 9/29 of 69, but it actually wasn't built until October 13th. So there was some kind of issue that they had to fix on the buck, or that they determined that they didn't have a part to finish the car, so the buck got pushed off to the side.
Right.
So as soon as you push it off to the side and you change the sequence, the next time that you would hit a point where they would print a new build sheet, you would get a new rotation numbers.
Okay.
So that's why we have different rotation numbers. This 639 is also the number written on the core support.
Okay.
So these were scattered throughout the plant, that there was probably 5 or 6 different places where they printed build sheets.
Okay.
That's why you'll see multiple copies sometimes for some cars.
Okay, I did not know that about the rotation numbers and why you would have got multiple rotation numbers.
Now then also traditionally, well, by 70, most of them were this size, 8.5 by 11.
Right.
There was, the earlier build sheets were smaller. So according to Kevin Marty, I talked with Kevin about why do I have a short build sheet. He said there must have been one printer left in the plant that was printing on the old build sheet.
Wow.
He said, I think this was the first one he'd seen in 70 in the short version.
Wow.
But that's the older style.
More useless data
that goes into our brains and it just stays there.
Okay, what else unique about this documentation can you show us?
Well, of course, we have the Eminger invoice, as we talked about that a little earlier. Those are, of course, available for Kevin, from Kevin Marty. Just
MartyAuto.com.
Yep, just certain years on.
And this is not a reprint. This is the original copy here, as these were stored forward for years until Lois Eminger, an employee that worked there, took them and started selling them.
Yep, she saved them. This also has a date stamped into the side of it, punched out. That is the date that it was gate released. Because this is the gate release copy is what was kept.
Right.
Notice this is copy number 2. We have a original window sticker.
Which Kevin Marty has the original printer, paper. He can do this window sticker spot on, and if you leave it out in your weather for a while, it can turn yellow and crinkly like this. So this is one document that you can reproduce.
You won't get it quite right though. If you look at them close enough, there's ways to tell.
Okay.
And of course you can't, you know, you got to, how do you get the paper to look just the right way?
Exactly.
Then we have different warranty information. We have the original sales agreement.
It's always fun to see what kind of car they traded in.
He didn't.
Oh,
He just put, what, $2,500 down in cash.
wow. That was a big deal.
That was a lot of money at the time. So he only had a balance of $1,100, less than $1,200 on his contract. Which he then took a loan out for, which cost him a grand total of a little less than $40 a month, $38.94 a month for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept all his receipts, all his letter from the salesman saying, thank you for buying a car for me, which led me to Ronnie Marstella, who still works at Marstella Motors.
And notice, you know, in these years, Lincoln Mercury was hurting, and the Cougar was the star child, and they started using the Cougar logo, and they even started saying, the sign of the cat. Hey,
Yep.
we got something going on. It's the Cougar. It certainly wasn't the comment.
And of course the Continental from the Lincoln side.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the premier car on the Lincoln side, so that's why the two are referenced.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I thought I'd seen it all with documentation stuff. I've owned well over 1,000 of these cars, maybe close to 2,000. I can't remember. Most of them parts cars, but this piece of documentation I've never seen. Look at this. It says just call us anytime alongside the road, 24 hours a day, and we'll help you out. And there is a date, 1969 dated dime slipped in there that they gave you that. And this proves this guy didn't have kids, because me as a kid, I would have had that out of that card and spent, or who knows what, several times over.
And then we have the two different owner cards.
Yeah, this is your temporary one. They said, here's your temporary one, and wait in the mail, and in 3 weeks you'll get your one from Dearborn, or wherever they mailed them from. And of course, you got your 1970 owner's manual here. And if you ever want to get correct keys made from us, and you happen to own your original owner's manual, well, those are the codes that you need to email to us off our website, and we can punch your keys.
Oh, now anybody can make a key for my car.
Okay, there's probably nobody else on earth that has this many variations of the chin spoiler, and you'd think, well, they just had one. No, there was original, and then there was service replacement, 6, 9, and 70. So explain the differences between these chin spoilers, and where would they have come when you got your brand new Cougar?
Okay. This one here, this is the 69 version, which is what most of the reproductions now are based off of. You notice we have the tabs. This is an NOS 69. Now, I don't know if this is the same as the assembly line or if there was a slight variation. When we look at the 70s, you'll see that there is a slight difference between assembly line and NOS.
Very flimsy. Now, didn't they have a problem at high speeds with this actually just folding over and going under the car?
Well, yes, that they had problems that they didn't stay where they were supposed to.
Right. So this was a cosmetic piece. I don't know as it held down the car. Spoilers hold it down, nothing holds it back. I don't think so. Notice there's not even a part number, a casting number, a manufacturer, nothing. So it's just a cheap little piece here.
Which is very flexible. Now, this, notice it's still flexible, but not nearly as much.
But I don't know as 100 miles an hour that'll fold over.
No, because we've got this extra lip added on the bottom.
Let me see that lip. Okay, so there's a lip on this one, but it's just, this is flimsy, and this one might crack if I...
Yeah, it's actually a little heavier.
Okay.
Heavier plastic. Now, this is an assembly line piece.
No tabs.
No tabs. The tabs are gone. We just have the holes. And the surface is flat.
Oh, okay.
There's no curvature to it.
No curvature to it. Okay.
This one, to my understanding, this is an assembly line piece.
For 1970.
For a 1970.
Okay. So we got assembly line, and we think this was service replacement because you have documentation that he damaged his, and in 1975 went to the dealership and bought it. Notice the concaveness here. Texture a little tighter. Weight about the same. Has the lip here.
The curves in the corner are similar.
Okay.
Everything else is so the original assembly line piece and the Ford NOS for 1970 are extremely similar.
Okay.
With the major variance being flatness versus a concave, a curve to it.
And I would think that most of these didn't last the year. So if you've got a 1970 original spoiler, you got chin spoiler, you got something pretty special.
That's the flat one. Now, as I said, this is a 75. Kevin Marty has one also for his Eliminator. It also has the curvature to it.
Okay.
But he bought that in, he said, like 76 or 77. So that's
Okay.
also, so that correlates to the same time frame that by that point, they'd added the curve. Now maybe that gave it a little more strengthening. Don't know. But
Okay.
so yes, there's a difference even in an OS from an assembly line.
Right. Okay, and here we go. What's this one? Is this a reproduction?
This is the reproduction that was done in the late 70s, early 80s,
Notice how wide that flange is.
which is too wide for fitting into the
Right.
space that's there in the valence.
Mm-hmm.
The thickness continues on the corners,
Mm-hmm.
but it's heavy enough that it'll hold up.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is also no longer available.
Mm-hmm.
These are the two variations of the most recent reproduction. And the only difference that I can see is that they've added the holes.
Right.
So this is probably an earlier version of it, and then at some point they decided to add the holes.
Mm-hmm. This is the texture, you notice, is not the same, much tighter than either of the other two.
Yep,
But nice sturdy piece here. So this is a pretty good reproduction.
yep. First 69.
Well, it's got the tabs, you're correct, yeah.
So to correctly get it to a 70, I would say that you would probably want to take the tabs off.
Shave the tabs off, but you're going to have a problem with that because if you take that tab
off,
off,
you
now
catch that
you've
hole.
got half a oval hole. So it's going to be a reproduction no matter what you do.
Right.
You're stuck with it.
That's the current, that's the same one you sell?
Right now, we don't have a supplier.
Ah, okay. So if you go to some of the other suppliers, that's the current reproduction that's out there. Is this one, which is actually not too far off the original NOS 70.
Right, right,
69, excuse me.
right.
As far as the way it looks, the texture's a little different.
A little brighter.
But of course, it's, you know, this is a one-year-old part.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, the grain is different.
Yeah, the graining's different. That one's much flatter.
Okay.
Very little texture on the 69 NOS. And you've got a little more, this is a sharper
Yeah.
corner. That's got a little more curvature to it.
Well, this is going to be our longest ever what to look for when you're purchasing a Cougar, but I think the people that want to invest in these cars will actually invest in the time to watch these videos. Thank you so much for bringing them, and if you know of anybody, or if you know of anybody that has some of the other models we haven't covered yet, a Cobra Jet Eliminator, a GTE, a G, really original cars is what we're looking for. I'd love to continue this series, so thanks for coming all the way to Oregon to do
Well,
this.
I'm actually heading to Washington. You were just on a side-by, so.
Yeah, well,
But-
when you came up with this idea, I was excited. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Let's do this video, and I think this is going to be helpful information. So thanks for preserving these cars and eloquently displaying them for us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.